Whether you're a startup or an experienced WISP, at some point you'll encounter RF noise, the number one problem of WISP networks. At RF Elements, we have the ultimate solution. Our horn antennas do not have any side lobes and provide an amazingly stable performance you can rely on. Our wide range of beam widths is an industry-unique tool set, and combined with extremely easy co-location enables unprecedented scalability. If you're facing unexpected demand, growing throughput requirements, and battle with noise and crowded spectrum, try RF Element horn antennas today.
Hello, everybody. I am Greg Sowell. I have been in the wireless industry for quite a long time, and I am here today to present you with this interesting and excellent Designing Your Network for Scalable Growth, do's and don'ts. So thank you for joining us today at this WISP Virtual Summit, for this live presentation and Q&A. Please be sure to stick around until the end of the presentation to collect a code for 25 points, which you can submit in the Play to Win tab on your left. So again, I've been in the industry for, 20 years. Been using MikroTik stuff for a long time. I've been operated a wireless ISP, done some of the consulting stuff. I own and operate an MDU-based ISP, and now I get to do automation using Ansible kind of as my day gig. So today, our first presenter is going to be Josh Potter. He is a wireless network engineer and software developer with 18 years of experience building successful WISPs. His passion is sharing his knowledge with the WISP and IT communities to realize their full potential for success. You can find Josh Haven on Everything WISP and WISP Talk discussions, talking about grounding, network configs, micropops, equipment, really anything WISP. So Josh, please take it away.
Greg. So I was asked to address one of my favorite topics here, so it's quite a fantastic thing to be invited to participate here. And thanks to Preseam for hosting this. Critical success factors. What does it mean to really succeed? Well, the first thing that is critical to success is understanding what it takes to succeed. And I really believe with all my heart that in every case, that answer is meeting expectations. It's really simple, but it's also a lot to master. The first factor that I'd like to bring up is that there are only three ways to grow. Whether it's your network or it's your business, it's really the same thing. You don't grow if you can't add more subscribers, or you can't sell them more services, or you can't keep your subscribers longer. There's no other mechanic that you can use to scale your WISP. So keeping your focus on making sure your business is scalable can help you make sure your WISP is scalable. Big concept that I find to be really important is that healthy networks don't create healthy businesses. Rather, it's healthy businesses that create healthy networks. So the second factor that I'd like to highlight here is converting bleeders to leaders. This is really about taking the time to pay attention to all of the details, the things that you don't always notice. And I see this to be a common problem where some of the least productive pop sites or tower sites become time sinks and money sinks. And so keeping track of how much money you're making on a per tower basis can help you really understand your profitability. You can base your deployment decisions on clear goals by looking at the market as far as a certain tower, how many customers are looking for service that are within that coverage area. At the end of the day, your network is really your investment. It's the asset that produces revenue, really. And if you really want to grow a scalable network, you have to have a network that you can build in a way that is financially productive. If you're creating bleeders, then your network doesn't scale. You really need to create leading towers. The third factor that I would like to highlight is to have standards. It's often the case that a tower with only 2 or 3 customers is the one that gets you out of bed at night. There's a call because somebody is having poor performance. These are the most painful towers. I spent years being a network administrator in a network getting those calls. Often it was, the dude that was sending me text messages where a tower went down and it wakes me up in the middle of the night, and I know that pain firsthand. So making sure that you've got sufficient battery backup, making sure that you've got multiple paths going into a tower. These are things that you don't want to skip just because the site is small. That's what makes your network not scalable. So having standards for how a site is constructed, having checklists that you can make sure are repeatable so that you don't miss things like calculating the runtime of your batteries, making sure that you have sufficient failover redundancy. If the site requires 100 meg and your backup link is only 70, then you're still getting calls if it fails over to the backup link. So, just being really careful that your standards are scalable, and that allows you to operate a larger and larger network. So in closing, I wanted to really drive the 3 points back home and say, don't get distracted, serve your customers' needs. Scaling your network is really about the only 3 ways to grow. You want to convert your bleeder towers into leaders. So watch your network and treat it as an investment, and build your network to standards. It's the only way that you can scale. And are there any questions? We'll be taking those, I believe, at the after Robert's section of the slides.
Right. Towards the end, we should have some question and answers available for everybody. Well, Josh, thank you so much for that. I actually made some notes, so I'm going to circle back and I'm going to pepper you with questions here shortly. But now it's time for Robert Terpe. He's President and CEO of BT Technologies. He's going to give us some rare insights.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robert, and you might remember me from other past encounters such as, wow, my network's running way better than it's ever been. And today, we're going to dig a little bit on the business side and the technical side on building scalable networks. I've been using MikroTik for quite some time as well, 22 years in the IT industry. And I do quite a lot of contributions on the Facebook groups such as WISP Talk and Everything WISP. And I'd like to talk about the 3 key factors for scalable growth on the business side as well. And we're going to break this down a little bit. So one of the don'ts that you don't want to do, or that's a double negative there, you don't treat this business as a hobby. Okay, this is serious business. People are depending on you to deliver a quality and reliable service. So if you just want to do it as a hobby, do not get into the business at all. Don't do it under budget. You want to make sure you plan accordingly. And so this goes into also going into don't be a bandwagoner. When I mean bandwagoner, you're going to hear a lot of people toss out various manufacturer brands saying, do this, do that, but actually come to an understanding of what the proper selection of the gear is. You need the right tool for the right job. Otherwise, you're going to set yourself up for a disaster down the road. Some manufacturers offer APs that don't have quite the subscriber density, and you might be very, very successful in your business and have a massive line of people wanting to sign up for your services, yet the infrastructure equipment that you've selected may not have been up for the task. So you want to make sure that you're able to get equipment that is essentially scalable to what your market needs are. Again, this is not a side job. Don't do this under budget. Don't be a bandwagoner. Look into the equipment that you really need to use for the job and take it seriously. So one of the other key factors is scalable customer communications. So we want to be responsive, not reactive. So what I mean by that is, say you have a situation where a tower goes offline, and now you have a whole bunch of customers that are disconnected from the internet. They're extremely upset with you, and calls and text messages just flood in. So now you're basically trying to do damage control and not dealing with the problem at hand. So what you want to be is more responsive to that and be able to offload those incoming communications into other channels. So you're still dealing with the customer still feels that they're being, responded to with their queries of what's going on. And there's several ways to get that handled. So for example, in some of the mentorship programs that our company offers, I've changed the names on here, but basically this comes up extremely often, as in case number one. We'll call him Likeable Larry. So he's, a firm believer in good communications, and he wants to interact with every customer on a one-on-one basis. So at the introductory stage of his business, he's at 30 subscribers. And during an outage, he's answering every single call. Now, if we take that and we go, say 1 minute per call to inform the customer on the phone what's going on, well, that's 30 minutes that has passed where we're not working the problem. It could be a simple fix that could have been resolved in moments. But now we're dealing with customers directly, trying to explain to them, a situation that they don't even comprehend of what's going on. All they really care about is what's up, what's down. And when they say, why is it down? Well, they're not really interested in why is it down. They just understand that it's down regardless of what explanations you're going to do for them. So the potential, the pitfalls in that type of scenario is now you've wasted a bunch of time, and also it's not scalable to be giving out your personal cell phone information or personal email or anything like that. It should really be funneled into your business communications line. So you want customers to be able to call in and deal with the front office desk, whether you have a receptionist or an IVR platform set up to handle that call load. So in this case, Larry is reacting. He's not being very responsive. It's just purely damage control. So here we'll change the roles up a little bit, and we'll deal with responsive Rob. So, I got a little typo there. Okay, so he's a believer in responsive communications. At this stage, Rob has 300 customers, and during an outage, we're able to send out mass emails, mass texts, automated phone calls are sent, inbound calls are directed to a recording saying, hey, we're aware of an issue in this area. If your issue is not regarding this, stay on the line and somebody will get with you. Otherwise, you just instruct them, hey, hang up. And when it's working, you can check in later. And so the benefits of being responsive is, in this scenario, we have an automated billing and provisioning system set up that can be set up to export call contact details to a mass text service, or we can have a mass. Hold on a second, my timeout. Laptop just unplugged on power. There we go. And so we have an automated billing platform set up, and we're able to export out contact information from there in order to do mass texts, mass emails, as well as automated phone calls to SLA customers. So those are business class customers that we're going to have on a specific list to let them know, hey, there is an outage. So we're notifying them before they're even calling us. And you want to make sure you're giving out your business contact information, not your personal information, in order for that to be scalable and have those calls and emails forwarded through a specific process for your organization. And because we're able to do that type of workflow, now we're able to work on the problem immediately. Thus, we'll have much less downtime, whether you have 300 subs or 3,000 subs or beyond. So automation is the key to growth, and you're going to be able to spend more time working on the problem, delegate your workflow, and prioritize. So if you have others that are able to assist you in your organization, whether you're small or large, I highly recommend that you utilize that skill sets of those individuals. Try not to micromanage. Divide up the problem and narrow down where the issue's at, and you'll be able to be much more successful and resolve your situations that you encounter in a timely manner. And don't forget, I use the 3 C's: be cool, calm, and collected, and keep that stress level low. Because if you stress, you can't think very good. And now that it only exasperates the problem. When you're dealing with irate customers, they're stressed, you're stressed, things are said and that shouldn't be said, and sometimes it comes to a poor situation. So remember, always be cool, calm, and collected. We're going to go a little bit into a general deep dive here with some do's and don'ts. So free up those man hours. Use auto provisioning. Don't need to go into the router every day or several times a day to manually add queues, manually set up customers. That eats up a lot of your time when you can be focusing on other projects such as expanding your network. And do it at day one. Don't wait for down the road. It's a justifiable cost expense to be able to use an automated platform, and it just saves you a lot of headache going down the road. So do it right at the beginning. Don't wait. So when you're engineering these networks, I'm always doing it from the perspective of I plan on growing the network. I don't plan on being stagnant. You know, we're in this business to make money. So that means you grow, expand, get customers, get that cash. So building a network from the ground up using a routed protocol saves you a lot of hassles. You don't need to have a bunch of static routes in the system, manually typing in routes. In some cases, you might fat finger a route. Use the routing protocols to have that take advantage for you, so you don't have to figure out what routes go where. OSPF, BGP will handle all that for you. I've also encountered lots and lots of VLANs on networks that in some cases caused loops and false positives on spanning tree and a few other weird oddities, and it's just a ton of spaghetti. We don't want spaghetti. And the manageability of it gets to be extremely convoluted, where your technicians can get very, very confused on what goes where, especially if you hire a brand new person to come on board as a technical engineer for your company. They're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's where. So VLANs do have their place in the network. Just don't rely heavily on them. You want to be able to, come up with a system design that's easily scalable. You can have some complexity in there, but remember, always keep it as simple as possible as well. And that goes into our next slide here. Complex but simple. So I implement quite a bit of OSPF and MPLS protocols across our networks. So by doing this, the efficiency of the network goes way up. If there's any type of problem between towers, the OSPF will redirect the traffic to the appropriate path, and the end user still has connectivity. The issue that you're going to come across is that if you have a link that's not properly scaled to handle that backup traffic, at least you have customers online and they're not, completely dead. So at least they're still able to surf and browse somewhat in case you have a link that's at capacity. But if you were to scale your backhauls to be able to take the influx load of having additional backup links go across it, that would be extremely beneficial for you as well, because then you won't get any support calls. You just get a text message saying, hey, I got a link down, we'll deal with it in the morning. So the individuals that are coming from a traditional bridge network, so we're dealing with flat networks, With this particular model that I have on the screen here, the manageability for it is still basically treated the same, but the underlying infrastructure is routed. Therefore, you're reducing your broadcast domains, you're isolating your backhaul traffic from your end users, and essentially just giving transport from the end user back to your head end out to the internet. So there's not much in terms of the difference in operation, really, between what your technicians are traditionally used to using versus going to a VPLS back solution. So again, we do have the auto failover technique, and once it fails over, obviously, that's going to be additional bandwidth going over those links, and you can also incorporate your management VLANs to go across the VPLS interfaces as well. So if you are into using VLANs for manageability, instead of having to tag the VLAN going across every single backhaul link, now we can just have it right over the VPLS circuit and terminate directly at the tower. So if a link changes states, now the VPLS circuit will pick the new path and the VLAN will ride along that new path with the tunnel protocol. So key factor number 3, don't want to manual provision customers. You do want to do auto provisioning. You need to stop turning off backup links because you're going to, a lot of you guys are running bridge networks, just standard flat networks. So you're having to turn off and on links in order to prevent loops. So spanning tree can take care of that for you, but realistically, you want to be on a routed infrastructure. So all your links are running all the time. So you definitely want to be going for intelligent routing on that. You don't need to create extra complexity, but there is some complexity involved, but keep it as simple as possible. And plenty of learning opportunities available. So I work quite a bit on the WISP Talk Facebook groups. You can find me there, and don't forget to join WISPA. And I'm ready for your questions.
Excellent. Well, Robert, thank you so much for that. Let's see. So again, any questions that the audience has, there's going to be a group discussion tab on the left you're going to see available. But for now, I'm going to fire a few questions at you guys. So before we get to those questions, I just wanted to say a quick note so that it doesn't fall out of my head, is that the code that you see on the slide, as a thank you for joining the session, here's your code that you've been looking for, and you can use it to claim 25 points on the play to win tab on the left. So don't forget to do that. But time for our question and answer. Is that on this last one? Yeah, there we are. Excellent. So in my opinion, in my expert opinion, because I know everything, no, I know that I don't know nearly enough. And so something I have learned over time is that the cost of knowledge is extremely high, right? And so knowledge is just knowing something, and then wisdom is application of that knowledge over time. And, somebody articulated it to me as in knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Right. So there's a lot of conflicting information, or there's a new technology that I'm curious about, but I don't know where to go with it. So where are the safe places I can go to get this information? And I'm going to preface it by saying, and Robert, you mentioned it, the bandwagoning. Don't be a bandwagoner. I love that. Or fanboy, maybe is another way of saying that. And so I think everybody who's been in the WISP industry for a little while knows that if you go to specific vendor forums and you ask newbie questions, you are going to be lit on fire and then strung up for everybody to see. So no, not necessarily. It's not always the safest environment to ask dumb questions, right? I'm new. I don't understand these things. So where do you guys go for this information sharing? Like where are the safe havens you can find?
I'll let Josh take care of this one for a little bit.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I go to friends first. The open forums, I'll often find, like, on a Facebook post, there's conflicting answers, and sometimes somebody who is just experimenting with the solution, they'll present their information as if they're an expert. And you can't always, like, Facebook messages or tweets or anything, they're really small. You don't know the context. So somebody says, yeah, I got this speed on a radio or something. It's like, maybe they've only been running it for one day and they don't know what the long-term viability of that product is. So it's very difficult to understand the scale that somebody is speaking at or their experience. So I've cultivated relationships that I trust, and I found those in the industry really by going to the WISPApalooza. I don't remember what year it was, but like 05 or something like that. I might have met you there, Greg, actually. I'm not sure, but you know, I found some trusted friends, and they've helped guide me quite a bit over the years, and I will reach out to them occasionally. Robert is in that category. I talk to him probably about once a month or something like that, with a little question here or there. Hey, what's your experience with this? So those relationships, I guess, is my best answer.
Yeah, I think that is a terrific answer. And I know for me, the beginning of my career, I was very antisocial. I was very quiet. So developing those human relationships was difficult for me, right? So making those friends in the industry, and you know, if there's a WISP that's right next door to you, you can't make friends with those guys. They're not going to share their secret sauce, right? You know, because they don't want you to, you know, consume them and take everything over. So finding that stuff is hard. And I ended up doing the same thing. That's how I started the Brothers WISP podcast. Was I just started collecting people that know so much. Everybody knows more than me, to be honest. Let's just be frank about it. But we even started a private Slack group, and so that is my safe haven that I can go to. It's just you develop this trusted resource of people that, especially if you can find people where there's no hubris or there's nothing behind it other than them wanting to help. And to your point, like you said, on the WISP Talk groups, there's a lot of good information there, but there will be conflicting opinions, and some of them will be extremely loud. And so it's like, how do you know which one to listen to? Sometimes actually having trusted friends, trusted advisors, other people that are doing it, people that have done it, you know, to bounce those ideas off of, I think are tremendous. Do you have anything you'd like to pepper in there, Robert?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, there is quite a lot of conflicting information available on the open forum. You know, it's the Wild West out there, and some things do work and some things don't. Now, a lot of the information comes from a background of ignorance. And I'm not talking stupidity here, although that does play into it in occasion. But the ignorance means that person just simply doesn't know any better than what they've been informed. Of course, you're also dealing with those people that come from the hardcore networking background, where they've lived their whole lives in big, expensive hardware. And they might see the price tag of, say, a MikroTik router, and it's way, way lower than what they've done. And they'll go on and go, well, how is it possible that a $100 router can do all these functions when this other piece of hardware, you know, costs thousands and thousands of dollars? And, you know, so they'll end up shooting down a product or a piece of software or whatever, not even based on using those products or services, but simply on their own personal biases of what they've run in the past with. As far as, you know, a safe environment for asking questions, WISP Talk Newbies also was created to have the new guys funnel into there. Josh Haven also started up another group, Everything WISP, and it's a fairly relaxed environment, but you know, guys like myself, Josh Haven, we're all here to help everybody. I receive personal messages all the time. Instead of people posting their questions directly on the groups, I get inundated with messages every day going, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And And I let them know. I'm like, yeah, go ask your question, man. And you can get the opinions of others and see what's going on. I'm a firm believer in the education process when it comes to learning about network technologies, whether it's a new product, new service, new software, anything. Because if you're stuck to one specific brand because that's what you're used to, well, guess what? You also started somewhere. You had to learn that. So learning something different and new should not be an issue, because with the advent of newer technologies coming out there and new cost-effective ways to deploy it, now you're going to get run over if you're stuck in the past and you don't want to learn anything new. Your competition's going to come in, mow you over, and next thing you know, you're out of business. So, firm believer in the learning process. So there's plenty of resources available online, various podcasts to listen to, Brothers WISP, excellent program, as well as the various Facebook groups. But, if somebody's going to flame you, they're going to flame you. Don't worry about them. Ignore them. Anybody else that's actually got the appropriate answer for you will respond in a timely manner.
That's awesome. I like the idea that you kind of gave there, is that you have information and you want to share it. Something I heard a long time ago is that, and I firmly believe, and I say this stuff a lot, right? I'm just an amalgam of things I've heard and I just regurgitate them. Is that this information that I've acquired over time, it's not mine to hold and keep, right? So I try and share that. I try and freely share that with folks as much as I can to build us in the industry and everybody else along with it. So this whole presentation was about scaling. So I've got a scaling question for you, and it's not one that I think most people think about. It's that scaling requires humans. It requires bodies. So at some point in your network or your WISP, or honestly anything in life, at some point as you grow, it's not scalable for you to do everything yourself anymore. Something I heard a long time ago was do what you're good at and find somebody else to do everything else for a good price. And so human-wise, I can only go so big. I mean, automation, like you spoke to earlier, Robert, does help you, right? It helps stem the tide, and that actually keeps things more consistent. So you're going to lower your errors and things like that. But at some point, you actually have to bring in bodies. You got to bring in humans. So how do you attract and retain good people? If I'm gonna get a guy to help me out, how do I do that?
Josh Haven, you want to take it?
Oh, I was afraid of that. Yeah, that's one of the big problems to solve as scaling a WISP. There's a number of factors that you got to really consider. I think one is motivation. How do you have your employees be motivated to work every day? And obviously money is part of that, but how do you create the work environment that is fulfilling to the people that you're working with? That's like probably one of the bigger challenges. The other, I think, is processes. Having the right processes that simplify the work. I mentioned earlier checklists. When I said having standards, I think that's really critical. If you just ask an employee to do something, but you don't have a way to train on how that is supposed to look, what the result is supposed to be like, that becomes very complicated for somebody else to make sure they're doing things consistently and scalably. And I'd agree with you. I think that it's important to kind of pass off everything. If you don't have to do it, then somebody else should do it. You got to figure out how to get stuff off of your plate. Early on in my career, I was a solopreneur for quite a number of years. I didn't know how to work with other people. Not that I didn't enjoy working with other people. I didn't know how to delegate. And that was one of the things I had to personally learn to solve that problem.
So learn to delegate. Something I heard, again, I'm going to say this a million times, that I heard is, if somebody else can do something 80% as good as you, delegate it, right? So us, a lot of, I don't know why this happens to be, but a lot of us network engineer guys are I don't know whether it's perfectionists or we're crazy superstitious that if we don't, cross ourselves 3 times and turn the light switch on 5 times, then that network deployment we're fixing to do is not going to work right. And somebody else isn't going to know to do all that stuff. They're not going to know how to throw the chicken bones just right. So it's kind of hard for us to get that out. And I think too, you spoke to standardization. That is 100% right. If you bring somebody in and you don't have anything to present them, you already don't have time to sit there and teach them every little thing. So if you haven't written out procedures for everything, if you don't have everything documented, how can you expect them to magically understand how to do all this stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Excellent. I also like the idea of how do you challenge them adequately? I think that's an interesting, thought-provoking thing. How do you keep them engaged and going as well? So, Robert, where are you at on the subject of people?
Well, with dealing with people, it gets to be very interesting. All of us don't really like to give up control. And so it does take quite a bit of effort in order to let that go, because, if you're able to find somebody and bring them on board, you're going to be able to do way more workload, because the advantage of having additional people, it's a synergistic relationship. It's not just, 2 people doing individualized work. You're probably going to be able to get 3 times the workload out of it just with one other individual, the way I look at it, because you're able to, each person brings a different component to the table, different levels of experiences. I've been involved in various situations that were outside of my field of expertise, and this is in the aviation industry, and dealing with an aviation mechanic, and he's sitting there trying to figure out what's going on, can't figure it out, and me coming from little to nothing, just hanging around, I'm like, well, did you try X, Y, Z? Well, it can't be that. I'm like, well, have you looked? And then they look, and it ends up being the problem. And so bringing in a fresh set of eyes when you're trying to work on a project definitely allows for an increase in critical thinking. Now, finding these people, that's the main challenge that you're going to come across, is finding people that are willing to work. So that's nice, and a quality person. And that's very, very difficult in various regions of the country in order to find that type of individual. That you're and what I mean by that is lots of us are in rural America. We're out in the middle of the sticks, out in the middle of nowhere. We're not in the downtown cities where we have 40 IT firms and hundreds of network engineers and cable pullers and fiber guys, all that stuff. We're out in the sticks in the middle of nowhere in most cases. And so, as you grow and expand your business, you're going to be able to meet with your customers essentially one-on-one with every installation that you do. And you might come across an individual that happens to be one of your customers that possesses the skill sets that you need in order to expand your business. So, you're able to kind of find your own labor pool within your own environment just by working on your own network and servicing customers. And not everybody starts out as a network guy either. So some of us can be any profession by trade, whether it's a contractor, plumber, electrician, whatever. And so by developing these relationships with everybody over time, you can give those people from your past a call and say, hey, what are you up to these days? I'm working on this project. Would you like to help me out with it? And so, you're already familiar with them, so you already know that these individuals are qualified or can be qualified. And finding people that are trainable is also key. You might have somebody that says, oh, well, I got all this experience. I know what I'm doing, and you try to tell them what your processes are for standardization, and they want to rewrite your whole business model and your whole book. and you go, "Whoa, what's going on?" and they give you a little bit of negative feedback there, that can lead to an unhealthy relationship. Is you need to find somebody that's willing to accept change, willing to be trained for your specific processes. Now, when I come into dealing with an organization, sometimes I'm not just overhauling the network and the technology. I have to overhaul the people as well. So I ended up stepping into the role of HR in some cases, where we have to work out interpersonal relationships with everybody, get things smoothed out. We have to deal with admin staff that deals with micromanaging, and a lot of the staff can't handle micromanaging. They need to be able to work, guided yet freely and on their own. And just check up on them every so often, see what the progress is. You don't have to be hovering over their shoulder the whole time trying to figure out exactly what they're doing. That's okay for the first week as they're going through training. That's expected. So you can kind of handhold them and say, hey, this is how we do things. And going through it and using the standardization process, that training can be exponentially quicker if you have proper documentation. They don't necessarily need to have a complete working understanding of the universe, but having those documents in place of depictions of your network, what's where, things like that can go a long ways, and proper documentation is the key. I myself, I'm not very great at documentation. And so when I'm working for somebody, I usually say, hey, if you want documentation, you do it, because everybody takes notes in their own way. So if somebody takes notes, they're able to understand their own writing. They're able to understand their own logic and understanding behind their note-taking abilities.
Mm-hmm. I hear you, bud. Yeah, absolutely. The people portion is so complicated, and to be honest with you, you hit so many amazing points that we could talk for literally an hour just on the things you said right there. But we are nearing the end of our time. We've got 4 minutes, so I wanted to squeeze in just one more. And I know this isn't a quick one, but I wanted to squeeze in one more question for you guys. And it is, when we're talking about scalable growth, we're building, we're growing. But how do we know when is the right time to grow? So how do you guys forecast at different portions of your network? Oh, this tower needs an overhaul. This town over here, maybe it looks like I could extend a little bit more into that. So kind of on the forecasting part, and just to kind of seed the idea, something I thought about is monitoring, right? If you don't know what your network is doing now, how do you know what it needs to do tomorrow? Or if you don't know what it looks like now, how do you know what it looks like when it's broken or working, or those things? So what do you guys do, kind of as briefly as you can, because we're running out of time? What do you guys do to forecast? Josh, what do you have?
So one thing that I did that was very successful is I took a map of all my tower locations, geographically laid out. I drew lines in between all of them where my backhauls were. And I tested every single backhaul and said, this is the rate that this thing is reliable at. I also put the number of customers that were at every single tower and the regular bandwidth, which goes back to monitoring, like you said there. Then I spoke with all of the installers, manager, and everybody, and I said, okay, realistically, how many subscribers are we adding per month? Are these numbers correct for what we could do in a year? I spoke with the owner, everybody across the board, and we came to an agreeable picture of what the network would look like in the future. And then we said, what areas would we add a couple more towers, and about how many more towers would we be adding? And I calculated exactly what the network was going to look like if we just scaled up to that next step. We exceeded what I calculated, but what we were able to do was we justified in that case $100,000. The owner was very hesitant to spend money, but we justified $100,000 in spending on putting Cambium licensed links in, and he was very hesitant to go into doing that. And it was one of the best things he did. When you look at his the number of subscribers, he just sort of like hockey stick up because his network had the capacity to handle it for the next year. So that plan ahead, use math. And one calculation that I found to be true. It was 1.87 meg per customer at the time that I did that exercise, and that's gone up a little bit. I think 2.5 meg is probably more likely what you're going to find in the COVID world. But just kind of know, like, if I have a number of customers here, I'm going to multiply that by my average utilization, and that's going to be my demand. And then I got to have enough headroom to take the burst. So I've got a favorite calculation for that.
Awesome.
Robert,
you've got 60 seconds. What can you do?
60 seconds. Well, I usually monitor all my backhaul lengths. I run a script from tower to tower on my microtik routers that does a quick little bandwidth test. I look at the raw data of the interface to see what that link is at, and then I have that all stored in a MySQL database. So if there's any type of link discrepancy, whether I lose modulation rate, things like that, I'll be alerted to that because it's going to be out of the norm. And you have to factor in human behavior. So when you're delivering internet to, say, a college campus or college kids, anything like that, they're going to pull a lot more data. So 10 of those guys is like delivering internet to a 55 plus community of like 500 people. And so it's all scales differently, depends on the type of people that you're dealing with because of human behavior. And so, I'm always monitoring the links. If I hit the 80% capacity on a sustained average on a link, I'm looking at upgrading it or adding an additional links to other towers to offload that capacity. The same applies for my backhaul backup to the internet as well.
Wow. Great information packed really tight. I like the idea of your demographics has a lot to do with it. Somebody was telling me that they were in Utah, and the vast majority of their customers were Mormons doing ancestry research on their people so they could baptize them. He said they use almost no bandwidth. It's amazing. So it goes a lot into it. All right, guys. So I think we have reached the end. Robert, thank you so much. Josh, thank you so much. And everybody listening, thank you for joining us today for this live presentation. Don't forget to head over to the group discussions tab on the left of your screen. I'll point a direction. It's probably wrong on my camera though, where you can ask any remaining questions you might have. I think we're going to be on there 30 minutes, hour and a half, somewhere in that neighborhood. So no guarantees. We might have pressing stuff. So I don't want to put a precise limit on it, but we hope you enjoy the rest of your time at the WISP Virtual Summit.
Thank you for tuning into this session at the WISP Virtual Summit, proudly presented by Perseem. Perseem is a one-of-a-kind networking solution developed exclusively for WISPs that helps to find and fix quality of experience issues across towers, access points, and subscribers. To learn more, visit perseem.com today.